Wow. Thank you so much for that amazing introduction. Actually, while we're in the mood for applause, I think we should definitely have a big round of applause for the people who have put today together. I know they've worked really hard, all the speakers have travelled. Hasn't it been a great day? Has everyone enjoyed it? What about the donuts? They're brilliant, weren't they? Yeah. Any left? No. Shocker. All right. So I'm conscious of being the man between you and the beer. So I'll try and be brief and take us back to time in about half an hour or so. So let's get started. This is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about vehicle manufacturing. We're going to talk about Greek philosophers, not architecture. Covered that this morning. This is the second part. And we're going to talk about the perfect flat white. I hope that's what you all expected. Good, good. Okay. First of all, let me introduce myself properly. So I'm John Clapham, as it says up here. I'm an independent agile coach. For me, being an agile coach is about 30% having a deep understanding of agile methods, Kanban, Scrum, Save Less, DAD, any of these methods. A bit of Kinevin as well. That's pretty important. But then it's 70% of the one-to-one behavioural and development coaching. There's conversations that you have with groups and individuals that help them get better at the things they want to achieve. The purpose of the organisation, the purpose of the person. Sometimes it's actually about figuring out what that purpose is. And so that's where the coaching element comes in. Something I'm particularly interested in both conversation with people about things they want to achieve and with organisations about how they're approaching things, is the lowest common denominator, or the root cause. What is a thing that can be done or changed or introduced that will solve many issues, will make things simpler, easier, faster, more efficient or more effective? And this is a bit of systems thinking. And so this diagram here is the classic way we think about systems. Socio-technical systems, they're not a simple linear process where we can go A, B, C, and if we want to improve something at C, we go back one level to point B and try and change it. We need to think more carefully about the relationships between all the things in our systems. And this applies to our software, it applies to testing processes, it applies to quality and really just delivery of taking something from one input to another output. Now, I'm lucky enough to have about 20 horses. But to illustrate the point about systems thinking, they all keep escaping. So I've got some choices here, right? My horses are escaping and they're running about in this big field. There they are. They're mocking me. You can see that mocking, can't you? You can see that going on. So the kind of things I could do, I could get better at chasing those escaped horses. I could perhaps start to catalogue them and say, all right, well, look, I know there's 2 over here. Write that down. There's still 5 more to find. I can maybe get some binoculars or a lasso, better tools, more people to help me round up all of those escaped horses. Or I could just close the gate. And this is what the systems thinking and the root cause approach is about. It's about looking at the things that need to be done to stop all the rest of the effort. And this is kind of how I view testing. Before we think about all the things we've heard about from the other speakers today in terms of great test methods, getting psyched up for testing, using things like selenium, the pillars of testing, we should look at what we actually need to test and how much of it is necessary. So we reduce the amount of testing that we have to do before we actually begin. And this is something that was pioneered by this fellow, Deming. Have you ever heard of Edward Deming? A few people have. So Deming helped to rebuild the Japanese motor industry after the war. And really, there wasn't much of it left. The approaches were quite antiquated. But based on the work of him and a couple of other American scholars, they transformed the motor industries there into these learning machines that just ate everyone's breakfast. You know, at the time, people like Ford were the dominant motor manufacturers. And then slowly, because they learned so quickly, people like Toyota started to take over to become the largest motor manufacturers in the world. And it was because of this approach, and his learnings, really. Now, let me just adjust this. See, people like Ford were getting very good at efficiency, very good at churning out cars very cheaply. They built huge conveyor belts, and they looked at saving dimes, tiny amounts of money in the production of cars. The problem was they then weren't flexible. And the other problem was that a defect introduced early on in the process on the conveyor belt would make its way all the way through all of the other vehicles. So the defects are escaping. And then, of course, they have to be recalled. And so you have more of a problem than you started with. And so Deming was one of the advocates of doing that quality checking and the testing early. He said this: cease dependence on inspection to achieve quality. Eliminate the need for inspection en masse by building quality into the product in the first place. And this is what we're all about in this session. It's about how do we build quality in. It's from Deming's 14 points. There's a few others I want to just quickly call out that I quite like. So he said, remove the barriers that rob the hourly worker of his right to pride of workmanship. Now this is in the 50s, when really people were generally regarded as wetware, as a resource to be moved around, told what to do and commanded. And this is one of those things that has emerged through Agile and has become increasingly important. The fact that if we are enjoying what we're doing and if we are motivated to do what we're doing, we'll do a better job. And the responsibility of supervisors must be changed from sheer numbers towards quality. Build a better thing in the first place. The other thing I want to just call out is a pet hate of mine, is he talked about 7 diseases of management, and one of them was evaluation by performance, merit rating, or annual review. Who recently had an annual review? Who's had one? Ever? Right, keep your hands up if you absolutely loved it. I got some sarcastic hands, some ironic hands over there, but not many people. So here's a load of things that we could do then to gain quality at source before we even start to think about testing. I won't go through all of these, but we could build the right thing. Has anyone ever spent a load of time in something that they've been building, perhaps testing it, exploratory testing, only to discover the product is not released or no one uses it when it's released? So I've got some slightly depressed nods going on, especially from kind of over there. There's a pocket of people who've had that experience. Sorry folks, it's awful. So building the right thing, that is a way to make sure that our testing effort is put in the most valuable place by only testing stuff that really matters and our customers will use. We can talk about continuous delivery. You know, if there's ever a way to encourage an improvement in speed of delivery and quality across an organisation, continuous delivery has to be it, because it links up so many different things. Continuous integration, constantly testing. Is this stuff ready for deployment? Setting clear goals. We've heard a little bit about that today already. Education, changing culture, Kaizen, that's the continuous improvement, the learning methods that people like Deming and Toyota are so good at. Changing your organisational structure. So these are all things that we can do. The one I want to talk about is engagement. Now, engagement is perhaps an odd one to bring to this conference. Isn't that more of a manager's thing? I mean, employee engagement, by the way, is, we're going to learn more about it, of course, but it is loosely the concept of how committed people are to their work. But it's a funny one to bring here, and I feel like it's not talked about enough. So why am I going to talk about it? Well, first of all, I'd like to get to know people in the room a bit more. I think I can just about see left and right. Interesting that we've got equal numbers in these two rooms. You've kind of load balanced automatically, which is really interesting. So, let's have some show of hands then, for those of you that are still awake. Who is an individual contributor? That means you write code, write tests, you have some output, but you don't really manage people or lead people on a regular basis. So hands up if you're one of those. Okay, thank you. So who would regard themselves as a leader or a manager? Someone who spends a lot of their time leading groups of people. Okay, thank you. And then who is a psychopath? a lot more hands. Okay, psychopaths, here's why you should care about employee engagement. All right, because of profit. I'll get to the reasons for the rest of you in a minute. So this is a quote from the DevOps Puppet Labs survey. They survey about 5,000 people each year to understand the state of practices in IT. Now, the relationship with DevOps is really about what is being sold and what's hot at the moment, rather than the nature of the companies that are involved. And they found this: companies with highly engaged workers grew revenues 2.5 times as much as those with low engagement levels. And it's really not hard to work out who those high performers are. It's the Googles, it's the Etsy's, it's kind of the Microsofts. It's those people that we already know. We can reel off their names. So they found that by getting their people to care about what they were doing, they made more cash. So that's a bit for the psychopaths. Here's a bit for the people that care about doing a good job. People found that with higher workplace engagement, it led to other things. Lower absenteeism, that's less people being off work. That's great, because I'm sure you've had that feeling when you come in tired on a Monday morning and find the person that you were going to rely on to do something is not there. They have a cold. They were in an advanced state of refreshment the previous evening and can no longer be with you. And you end up doing their stuff. Or it makes everything late. Fewer safety incidents, less accidents at work where there's high engagement. And crucially, for our conversation, fewer quality defects. Significant decrease where there was high engagement. So there's an angle then for people that care about quality. And now on a personal basis, let me ask you something again. Who would you rather work with? This fellow? Actually, or this fellow? Okay, hands up for person one. It's it's the psychopaths again. We should rename this conference. And who would rather work for Smiley Guy? And who doesn't want to work for either? Okay, so you might want to work for him, and we'll hear about him later. So engagement is a very human thing. The amount of time that we spend at work is enormous. The only other thing we do more than work, or get to work, is sleep. And if you think about it in terms of those hours, you want to enjoy them. So you want to be working with whichever one of these that you chose. Now, I briefly worked for him. And this is something I want to emphasise. This stuff isn't just for managers. I know that there's a range of people in the room. And I think engagement matters because you can contribute to it and you can improve it. And if you don't do those things yourselves, if you let someone else do it, you're leaving it up to people like this. Now, Balmer actually turned out was pretty good at that stuff because he let other people do it and was wise enough to do so. But this is too important based on all the hours that you spend at work to leave to someone else. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and understand a bit more about what engagement is. We'll look at the ingredients of it, and then we're going to look at some really practical things that you can do in your organisations to try and increase it. As a result, I would hope that you'll see the quality of your products, I'm using the Q word again, apologies, will go up, and hopefully you'll enjoy things more. And then, if you're not, you at least have a baseline to make a decision. So this is a flat white. It looks almost perfect. And in fact, this picture is stolen from ratemyrosetta.com. You can look it up now if you find this uninteresting, and you can rate the quality of people's coffee chocolate swirly thing. And this is one of the highest rated on the site at the moment. And this is our aim. We all know what a good cup of coffee looks and tastes like, I hope. We should do after today. But actually making that cup of coffee is much harder. So, to dig into engagement then, this is what our cup of coffee looks like. It is the extent to which employees commit something, or let me start that again. The extent to which employees commit to something or someone in their organisation. So something might be the brand, it might be the cause, that someone might be their peer, their co-worker, their leader. But it's about how much they give to it. And how hard they work and how long they stay as a result of that commitment. Okay? The other way it's defined is in the opposite. So is burnout a phrase that you're familiar with? A few nods. Can I ask people to be bold? Who feels like they suffered a bit from burnout? I can put my hand up for this for sure. Okay. So the burnout antithesis defines engagement by burnout being working too hard and then getting these feelings: exhaustion, cynicism, inefficiency. And you'll have bad days as well, and that's sometimes called brownout. That's a smaller version of burnout. So we try and define engagement as being the opposite of this because we found burnout easier to define. So engagement then is the other side: energy, involvement, and efficacy, which means being effective and being good at the things that you are doing. And there's some things that engagement isn't, and these are common definitions, I guess, of engagement, which are slightly askew. So showing up, going to work does not mean you're engaged. That probably just means you don't want to be told off, and you quite like getting paid. Working long hours isn't really a sign of engagement. It's normally a sign that something's wrong and needs to change. The company won't necessarily reward you for working 12 hours and producing a load of poor quality stuff. Using 20% time, using research time for work. This is a classic, this drives me mad. In places I've worked where we've granted research time, people have often come to me and been proud of the fact that they've used that research time to deliver more stories, to deliver more customer stuff. But that completely defeats the object. The object of research time is to build a culture of learning and experimentation and to build that habit. That's why it's weekly, that's why it's frequent, so that people get used to innovating and thinking creatively during working hours. If you use that time to do more work, you're not actually doing what the company intends you to do. You're not building the culture that it's interested in. And being busy work, we call it in time management, checking your emails, running from meeting to meeting. It sometimes feels good because it feels like we're working hard, but our actual output is not necessarily that valuable. And what it does look like, what engagement does look like, is a commitment. So a real caring about doing things, a real caring about output, actively and spontaneously helping other people. That is a big sign of an engaged group. And just have a think now amongst yourselves. When was the last time someone spontaneously said, "Hey, what are you doing? And how can I help you?" With the underlying assumption that they've noticed that what you're doing is perhaps more crucial and more important than what they're doing. So they're willing to help. And of course, working smart. That means looking for the high value activities, looking for the things that matter, rather than perhaps the things that you've been asked to do in that day. And the secret ingredients of this, our secret blend, our secret roast, is this thing. It's called discretionary effort. It's the difference between what you have to do, it's like the minimum viable job here. So that's what you need to do to not get sacked. Now, I know that very few people come into work every day and think, right, how little can I do in order not to get noticed? Even though we might think that, and we might look at the person over there and say, oh, he's not doing much, what are they here for? So that's the line then of actively disengaged employees. And then this, and note by the way that everyone starts at the same level, because when you join a company, your contribution is naturally going to be quite low while you understand it and learn. So the want to do curve then, that's where our engagement comes in. That's where the people are engaged and performing and really contributing to the organisation. Discretionary effort then is the gap. It's what you volunteer to do. And if you want to know a great way to see discretionary effort, unplug the servers at work and shut down all of the electricity. Then you'll see what people choose to do. And if everyone just goes to the coffee room, or if everyone just goes home, you realise there isn't much engagement. But if they still try to do things and try to help bring all the systems back up, you have engagement. But really, you shouldn't try that. So this is the Corporate Leadership Council. They have a special knack of making things really dry. And this is their special dry way of describing what I've just said. The level of engagement is a combination of the rational commitment, And we peeked at this earlier with the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That's the basics that you need. And then the emotional commitment. This is the famous Dan Pink autonomy, mastery, and purpose piece. Is how your spirit is engaged. And that leads to two things that they care about: discretionary effort and how likely are you to stay in the company. So, I hope you've been keeping up. Let's have a quick quiz. I'll show you these familiar faces. Who is the most engaged? Person A, B, or C? Who thinks A? Okay, I've got some shouts for C. Okay, who thinks B? Okay, got some in there as well. And who thinks C? Okay, so here's an interesting thing. Person C is obviously very happy, but happiness is not necessarily engagement. Lots of people are happy to go to work, big work, especially parents, because it's warm, there's Wi-Fi, there's coffee, and there are no children. Okay? I speak from experience. That doesn't mean I'm engaged. That just means I've escaped. That's why I'm happy. So we can't fall into this trap. And lots of surveys, employee engagement surveys, that are looking to create this and understand it in companies, they just look for happiness, but it's not really enough. And happiness isn't engagement surveys. If you want to disengage a lot of people, hit them with an engagement survey. That works nearly every time. But you can measure some of this stuff. Net promoter scores, I guess you're familiar with these pop-ups on various websites. They aim to ask an insightful question with actually quite a lot of psychology behind it. This is what Apple use for their employees. Just a really simple question. 0 to 10, how likely is it you would recommend? And the word recommend is crucial because it's about a trust relationship with someone, with a friend. I care about the friend. I care about their future. So would I recommend them to work in this place? So NPS is often used internally as well to understand engagement. Similarly, how likely is it to recommend to a friend or colleague? There's some fun stuff that you can use to measure it. I stumbled across this when I was doing the research for this talk. This is a sociometric badge. Now what you do is you wear it around your body and it tracks your movements and tracks your interactions with people. And you create a graph like this. So the bigger nodes and where you see lots and lots of lines is where there's lots of communications. And what we can see here is the purple, green and red teams have a very healthy amount of communication between them. This is from the Fast Company, this stuff. There's the guy who designed it is the same guy who did Google Glass in the MIT labs, Alex Pentland. The blue team, though, you can see that they're a bit more dispersed. And if we look very carefully at this point, we can notice something interesting. There's one person, one individual, appears to be the main link for this whole team. So we learn something about how engaged they are with each other and how crucial that one person is for team communication. And these two guys are showing that wearing sociometric badges is not awkward at all. Maybe not. Here's a very cheap and effective way to measure engagement, something like we're doing today, in fact, with the smiley faces, Nico calendar. So let's move on to our ingredients. So I hope we now know what we want to create. We know what our cup of coffee looks like and what we want to drink. So let's think about the actual ingredients. Anyone recognise this picture? This is a deconstructed flat white that was being served in a coffee shop in Australia, and it caused an absolute outrage because you're bringing the ingredients to the table to mix yourself. So Google are just always looking for data, right? And they'd probably be really interested in how many times I've nearly tripped over this really expensive projector down here as I walk around. But they're also very interested in engagement surveys. Project Aristotle then, they looked at both academic papers and they looked at their teams to try and find out what the difference was between high and lower performing teams. And they came up with these. Dependability. So can we count on each other to do high quality work on time? So if I am able to depend on my team and I'm reliable and I can rely on the people around me, I can focus fully on my role. Brilliant. Structure and clarity. Are goals, roles and execution plans clear? So that sense of purpose. And again, it's not about control, it's about setting a goal. People find their own ways to achieve it. It's not about control. The meaning of work. Are we working on something that's personally important or meaningful to us? Generally, people aren't that motivated by profit. They aren't that motivated by making a lot of money for someone on a board. But they are motivated by craftsmanship, by customer satisfaction, by the feeling that they solved hard problems. They also talked about the impact of the work. Do we believe that what we're doing matters? Matters to the world, matters to us. And the last piece was psychological safety. Can we take risks on this team without feeling insecure or embarrassed? So this is a great work. It's kind of unfortunate they didn't have access to search engines in Google's, because they might have found this, which we saw earlier. Maslow's hierarchies of needs from 1943. The last point there, psychological safety, exactly as the Google survey. But it's good to refine these things, rediscover them. And David mentioned earlier that Wi-Fi is down here. The other one that you frequently see is battery, which you're not going to get very far without. So going back to psychological safety then, Google found that that was the most, or at least felt that that was the most important factor. Now if we think about that, that makes a lot of sense. Psychological safety is what enables us to be creative and to work our best, and it's often a barrier almost to being effective. You know, we're all here as experts. We're all in a room in our works as experts with something to bring. But often it's the feeling of safety, or rather I should say, the amount of safety we have determines our contribution. I think back, when was the last time you didn't ask a question or didn't raise your hand because you were apprehensive, anxious, nervous, you felt that someone might tell you you should have known that thing? And I think there's been a few people, when I've been asking silly questions, who have not put their hands up to any of the questions. And possibly that's about psychological safety. Think back to when your first day at work ever. You know, doubtlessly you tried to stay out of trouble. That's the psychological safety aspect. And so that's what really matters in teams, is creating that safety so we can take risks, so we can throw in ideas and not feel like we're going to get punished for them. So now we're going to look at how we assemble those ingredients that Google have told us about, and other surveys pretty much come up with the same conclusions. So I started off thinking that you could look at body, mind and spirit when you're trying to build engagement. And the body is an easy one because we can look at things like fatigue and the effect on output. You know, we know that if you try and drive a long distance when you're tired, you are many times more likely to have an accident. There's some great statistics online that if you drive for something like 11 hours, it's the equivalent of having 2 pints of beer in terms of your level of alertness and ability to react to things. So I thought, right, I'll test this theory. And I found this, the graph that means almost nothing. Time at work, time away from work. And yet it's from fatigue risk management for the Canadian aviation industry. The only thing I can think is that none of these people have children. Because when you have children, you have time at work, and then you have children. It's frightening. But I wanted to raise this. It's part of confirmation bias. I don't know if you're familiar with cognitive biases. They're things that short-circuit our thinking. They try and help us by speeding up our thinking. And one of them is this, the confirmation bias, the tendency to latch on to things that reinforce our opinion. And that graph is just perfect. So let's move on to some things that you can do. These are going to vary between things that are probably most suitable for the leader and manager types. I don't really like using that divide because actually every one of you in here and here has the potential to be an influencer and to lead, even if it's in an unconventional way. You can lead your team by setting a good example. You can lead your team by bringing them new knowledge that will make them better at what they do. And you don't need to be a manager to do that. So sorting out incentives then, this is a big one because the way the performance is managed is often actually quite demoralising and doesn't work for people. Extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation. If you ever think about who goes jogging or swimming or does some kind of potentially competitive event here? Anyone? Really? Only 2 people? Thank you. Sorry to wake you up there. So, where do your goals come from? What works for you best? If you put on your trainers and say, right, I'm going to run for 2 minutes longer or half a mile longer than I did last week, or does it work best if I swan over once a month and say, right, now I want you to run this fast? You know, one of those is going to be incentive to you, the first one, and the other one you'll probably just think, well, this is crazy, but I feel like I have to do it. So getting those goals right and getting the purpose is absolutely key to keeping engagement and keeping our commitment. Improving communications. It's a classic thing when I go in as an agile coach and I'm asked to look at transformation. Nearly always the first question I'm asked when I talk to people on their own in teams is my job safe? That's because of a lack of communication. The information is not filtering down to people to help them understand where they are in a transformation, where they are in the change process, and what is likely to happen. So improving those comms so that everyone understands the goals, understands where they are, and managing change is a really significant area to look at. The other one is, of course, the org chart. This is a blame chart that I've stolen from somewhere. You know, it's crucial to realise these are not allowable communication channels. If I'm here, I don't need to go all the way up here and back to talk to here. And yet, often people treat it like that. You look at the amount of levels to get from a piece of work over here right to here. It's craziness. So when you're talking to other people and thinking about where to communicate, just ignore that. It's a construct that's useful for understanding rank and hierarchy and all sorts of things like that. But day to day, when you're trying to add value and get things done, it's just not that constructive. Stomping on underperformance, this is one of the really big ones. If you've ever worked with someone who isn't performing, you'll know how toxic it is and the way it spreads. Unfortunately, underperformance and poor behaviours tend to spread much quicker than the good. For some reason, we're all just built a little bit cynical, and therefore we pick up on these things more readily. And so stomping, which means to stand on underperformance, is really crucial. But that can be just little things like calling it out and saying, how does that help us with such and such a goal? Things like the daily stand-ups in Agile are very useful for this because you can start to address those things. You can start to talk about underperformance in a very small way so it never becomes a big problem. Just say, are you focused on this? This is what we're doing today. Let's go and do it. Shift left. So this is this notion of if you have a long sequence of processes between the making and the building stage and the actual release, can we move some of those towards the left to tighten our feedback loops? So the classic things are, for instance, rather than doing all of the testing towards the end of the cycle when you feel like the product is built, shift left, get the testing in where the product is built. You have a tight feedback loop, and the chances of defects escaping becomes much smaller. If you look towards the DevOps movement, that is a classic cookbook for left shifting. And of course, in operations, we see a whole class of exciting errors and security issues that compromise the quality of our products. And so developing an understanding of those areas is pretty critical. So seeking out diversity and being inclusive. I'm conscious I'm going quite fast, but I can hear beer being assembled down there. I don't want to keep you for too long. Diversity really matters. Diversity of perspective, diversity of ideas, diversity of background. These are all the things that help us to build robust products because they're likely to get tested and looked at in different ways that we didn't expect. The other interesting thing is diversity impacts engagement. Often men report that they find it more engaging to work in balanced places where there's a healthy gender balance than when they're surrounded by people that are very similar to them. Which is an interesting finding that goes against the balance that you find in an awful lot of companies and industries. Engage early. So this is about recruitment. If you think about when engagement starts, it actually starts before your first day. It starts when you walk in for your interview, and also then when you're interviewing people that you potentially want to come and work for you, you are starting to engage them at that point. Some would argue it goes even sooner, and that's why companies invest so much in their brands, It's because they're engaging people, they're helping people to understand their purpose, understand their goals, and all those things that improve engagement. I'm going to skip through this one. So, we're on the home run. I'll just have a quick swig. I'll let you try and guess what this slide is about. Now, control chaos. Oh, that would be good. Can I start again? So, the thing about engagement, either positive or negative, is that it's self-perpetuating. So the little things matter. And the little things that happen in your teams are what determines the overall engagement of the team and the engagement of yourselves. So, as we said, one bad performer will tend to lead to another, and before you know it, you have a team that you don't want to work in. So what we're going to do now is some quick fire things that you could do, and you could do them tomorrow. I know a lot of what I've talked about might seem like high-level mumbo-jumbo that you can't access or would take a lot of time or effort to make happen in your organisation. But these things are quick and cheap in terms of time. So saying thanks. When was the last time you said thanks to someone, sincerely, for what they did at work? You're probably very used to it in your families and with your friends, where you are actually engaged, but not so much at work. But this matters. This makes it feel good. Is there anyone in the room who doesn't feel good when people say thanks to them? Even the psychopaths have got their hands down. So this matters. There we go. Sam Walton. The Walton bit is important. He invented Walmart, who are kings of engagement. Nothing else can quite substitute for a few well-chosen, well-timed, sincere words of praise. They're free and worth a fortune. And they were to him. Ask for feedback, but then actually listen. That will improve you. The chances are the person who is giving it will feel good and responsible as they are contributing to make things better for you and the team. Pair up or mob. So this is a great way to share knowledge, get to know people, gain confidence, make your work life more interesting. Mobbing, if you're not familiar, is basically pair programming and pairing with the whole team. So everyone that you need. It's the ultimate left shift. Everyone that you need is gathered around a single keyboard and monitor, contributing. Stop seeking permission. We're very good at sitting in what you might call our comfort pit. We're very good at finding excuses not to do things. And permission is the classic. No one says I can do that, so I'm not going to do it. If we try a day or 2 days without thinking in that way, suddenly we realise there's an awful lot that we can do. Celebrate the right success. So celebrating success makes us feel good, but it needs to be the right kind of thing. A classic one is celebrating the number of bugs that are closed in a time period. Well, great, you've closed lots of bugs, but it doesn't mean the same ones won't reoccur next week unless you solve the root cause. So celebrating the right things is important. Reinforce the behaviour that moves the organisation forward rather than just doing busy work. Offer to help someone. Take a risk, take a chance, try it. Particularly if things are quiet where you are, go somewhere else and find where the action is. And the last one, I'll probably get in trouble for this. Ignore your job title. You were hired to do something, and unless you're a week in, that hiring was really a way to attract you into the organisation by saying, we want someone who looks roughly like this. But all too often we start to define ourselves with our job titles. But actually, what we're there to do is to bring our expertise and our creativity and that mix that only we can bring to add value to the organisation and to our teams. And to some extent to challenge ourselves and learn. So forgetting about our job title and considering what we can really do to add value is an important thing to think about. You need a bit of courage to do it, but give it a try. Right, we're in the final furlong now, I reckon 2 minutes. So some of the things I've talked about and some of the other great things that you heard today, they might seem quite radical, particularly where they talk about changing the role and changing what you feel that you've applied to do, the role that you wanted to do, the job title you were hired for. And I want to remind you of this. This is the law of conservation of energy. The total energy of an isolated system remains constant. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Rather, it transforms from one form to another. So in the organisations where they have changed their ways of working, and certainly the ones I've been in, it's not, as David said earlier, that the revolution tends to kill lots of people and they go away. It's more that they change into something else. And here we have the difference between new work and unplanned work in the high and lower performing organisations. And what we can see is that the nature of people's roles in the highly engaged organisations has changed. They do more new work. They spend less time on rework. I know which one I'd rather be doing in my organisation. So people already show up, as we know. People will go where it's warm and there's coffee. But discretionary effort, what you choose to do with your time at work, is what really makes a difference to engagement. So Simon Sinek, who his great TED talk, Start With Why, definitely worth looking up. Good way to appraise what you're doing, good way to appraise what your organisation is doing and test whether it really is going somewhere. When people are financially invested, they want a return. That's right, there's a deal there. But when people are emotionally invested, they want to contribute. And this is why we see and get so much satisfaction from volunteering for things. There isn't finance, but it's something we care about. High engagement correlates with high performance. This is what data geeks everywhere are saying. These engagement levels, and this is why it's important for things like testing and quality, they impact the bottom line, hiring, retention, and safety at work, but they also crucially impact customer satisfaction and quality. Marketing guru Sybil, I can never pronounce this, Sturshik, she said, the way your employees feel is the way that your customers will feel. So as we came in at the start, engagement is a method of building in quality. Everyone has a part to play. I hope I've convinced you of that. This isn't just for the managers, and if you leave it up to the people in leadership positions, you may not get the environment that you want, and actually there's a high chance that those people want your feedback, want your input, and would welcome it. So based on the fact that there are lots of things you could do, I'd like to ask this. What will you do tomorrow? And then there's only one way to finish a talk like this. Engage. Thank you very much.